You serve the Absolute. You serve me. Bow, you dog. Bow!
Hey guys, it's DVD Gamer Girl here. Welcome back to my channel. So a while ago, I had made a video ranking the Baldur's Gate 3 companions into a tier list based on how emotionally mature that they are. And I had a lot of fun doing that, and I really enjoyed reading your guys' comments on if you agreed with me or disagreed with me, etc., and what factors you think contribute to emotional maturity. That kind of gave me the idea on what if I did the same tier list but for the villains, because, you know, the villains, like, morality is kind of out of the question because they're obviously doing some very immoral things, like there's no gray area there, but it would be cool to still rank their emotional maturity despite their moral tendencies. So let's get started. I did pretty much pick like the super major villains where I feel like we have enough information about them to kind of make a determination on how mature they are. If you want me to do a part 2 on some of the more minor villains in the game, definitely let me know. So let's start with Gortash. Gortash is definitely an interesting one. I feel like he's one of the more pragmatic and kind of nonchalant of the villains, I would say. Like, on a first glance at him, like, you wouldn't really think he's some crazy psycho person or anything like that. He has a pretty difficult history as well, where he was basically sold off to a warlock who was working for Raphael by his parents. He underwent some torture during that childhood period of his life. Eventually he escaped. He worked with Dirge to make a plan to enslave the Elder Brain. Then eventually he was also working with Kethric and Orin, although he didn't like them as much as he liked the Dark Urge. But what I find about Gortash is I feel like he's in tune enough with emotions to be very calculated and manipulative in some of his decisions and his alliances. Unlike some of the other villains, he's not, predisposed to just like murdering people like crazy. He's more about power, dominion, and control, and he will be very logical in how he goes about achieving that and who to align with. I feel like, though, this kind of contributes to him not really building very real relationships. Like, he's focusing on building his empire and getting control over people, but he's not really tied to anybody else in terms of actual bonds, relationships, and things like that. Everything is basically a power play or a power dynamic or some type of semblance of control. I feel like he also keeps his emotions on a pretty tight leash. And I think that doesn't really point towards very great emotional maturity. I feel like emotional maturity is also being able to express your emotions, not necessarily repress them and control. I think he's very charismatic, but in a very detached way, which is why he's kind of able to have these really calm conversations with you about essentially like mass murder, mass control. Like, it's very like interesting actually the way it is. And I think he has mastered control, but he doesn't actually participate very much in like actual human, genuine, intimate connections with people. So from that sense, honestly, I think I'm gonna put him in probably work in progress. Actually, I'm going to put him in mature with room to grow, because I do think there is something to be said about how well he does at forming alliances with other people, and he does keep his word, he does recognize his emotions, etc. He just doesn't really care about them. All right, let's talk about Kethric. Kethric, he actually used to be a good guy. Like, he used to be a part of the Selenites. His wife died and his daughter Isabel also died. When his daughter died is when he kind of went off the deep end. He became a follower of Shar and Shar's chosen. He did a lot of terrible things under that. Then eventually he sacrificed his mind, body, and soul to Merkel for resurrecting his daughter Isabel. When Isabel actually came back to life, she really denounced him for everything he had done, and she felt like he had gone way too far to the point where it actually hurt her personally as well. So based on this, I feel like he does have some sense of emotional maturity in the sense that he had some empathy, love for his family. He recognized that empathy and love for his family, and he's kind of a father who would do anything for his daughter type of thing. And I feel like you do have to have some level of emotional maturity and connection to be able to have that type of bond. But that being said, he is not mature in the sense that he goes way too far, and he basically goes off the deep end when he experiences grief or anger or loss, anything like that. He takes all these really, really dramatic, impulsive actions that are actually hurting him and hurting the people that he loves in the process of that. So he wasn't able to cope with his grief very well. He's not emotionally regulating himself. He's not processing it. And he kind of throws himself into these gods and goddesses and devotion in order to just try to get back a semblance of what he used to have. And I definitely don't see that as emotional and mature whatsoever. I feel like he is very much not emotionally regulated at all. I am going to put him in emotionally stunted because as much as I almost would put him in emotional disaster just because of the gravity of all the actions that he has taken that end up hurting people, I think that the amount of love and care that he had for his family does point to, some level of emotional maturity. I don't know if it's really maturity per se, but I feel like if you were completely emotionally immature, you wouldn't even be able to form bonds that are that deep with people. Also, he is very self-reflective, like in the sense that you can kind of talk him into the fact of realizing what he's done, and he can essentially sacrifice himself and then you just fight him as Merkel and skip the whole Kethric phase. So I think he can learn and he can understand, which gives him like a little bit more of a point away from being at the very, very bottom of the list. Next, let's talk about Orin. She also has a very rough backstory. She was basically birthed from her mom and her grandfather, who was also her dad, so there was definitely some incest going on there. Her mom also tried to kill her when she was a child, and Orin was actually able to fight back and kill her mom instead and become the chosen of Baal. Orin is extremely sadistic. She's very bloodthirsty. She's very, very emotionally volatile, and I feel like she has zero emotional regulation whatsoever. Like, it's all about bloodlust for her. She loves the thrill, she loves rage and the chaos, and she expresses it all through blood. I feel like it's almost like a high for her, and there's literally just zero emotional regulation. She doesn't like suppress anything per se, but she acts on it to the highest degree, to the point where there is no rhyme or reason, there's no control. It's just like a completely unregulated, chaotic, psychotic type of, life that she lives. It is kind of interesting, like in that sense, that she's so unrestrained, but in terms of emotional maturity, there is absolutely zero there, and she is a complete disaster. I mean, I feel like, this is just me speaking, I feel like there is something somewhat attractive about how unbridled and crazy she is, but I mean, there's no maturity there whatsoever. Next, let's talk about Raphael. Raphael definitely gives theater kid. He's very performative. He's a Cambion. He's the son of Mephistopheles. He lures mortals into making contracts with him, and I feel like a lot of these contracts are very manipulative and end up putting people in debt to him. Like, for example, if you think about your Gear's contract, Raphael had basically manipulated that contract in a way that he felt like your Gear would stay indebted to him by not being able to figure out how to fulfill his end of the contract, essentially. So he's definitely very manipulative. And he's power hungry. He wants to obtain the crown of Karsus for power. I feel like Raphael, he is very cold and calculated in terms of understanding emotions. I feel like all of his lines, all of the kind of attractive, seductive ways that he talks to you, all of his offers are kind of preying on like what people want, and he knows that that's what people want. I feel like it's almost like he studies people in a way so that he can offer them what they want and try to kind of get into his allure and just be in his debt, essentially. And I feel like he's almost like a master of human emotion, and it makes him very compelling, but it's also in a very manipulative and performative way. Like kind of similar to Gortash, he uses his understanding of people's emotions and desires against them. He doesn't use them to form like genuine, authentic connections with them whatsoever. And obviously his morals are completely out the door. I mean, he literally tortures Hope down in his chambers in House of Hope. And he also has a very, very high ego. Like, for example, when Harlot basically tells you that Raphael doesn't last very long in bed or whatever, and then you bring that up against Raphael, like he gets like very offended by that. So he has very high ego as well. So that being said, I think I'm gonna put Raphael in probably work in progress. Yeah, I mean, he's kind of similar, honestly, to Gortash. Gortash with the alliances, Raphael with the contracts. But something about Raphael just feels even more performative than Gortash. Whereas Gortash, like sometimes like when he's actually telling you he wants to work with you, he doesn't have any ill will or ill feelings towards you. It's more about just gaining power per se. Whereas Raphael, I feel like, I don't know, he would just kind of backstab anyone. I don't know. Honestly, they're very, very similar. So this is very, very on the line, I guess. But I just feel like Raphael is a little bit more immature than Gortash. Let me know what you guys think about that. Now let's talk about the Emperor. Emperor, I feel like pretty much everything that he does is in terms of self-preservation. Like he's extremely, extremely selfish to the point of just, you know, having no qualms about hurting other people in the name of self-preservation. And he's kind of similar to some of these other characters in the sense that he has picked up on emotions and people's desires so well that he uses it in a way to essentially like manipulate them. Like that's what he does with our main character throughout the course of Baldur's Gate 3. He is basically like playing chess with you, mentally. It's like he knows like the emotions that you're feeling. He knows how to frame himself in a way that makes him appear as your protector and savior and kind of invite you to trust him. But there's a whole layer of deception and manipulation underneath that. He doesn't think that there's protection just for the sake of protection. For him, protection is essentially mastering you, guiding you, making your decisions for you. It's about power and control. There's no free will, essentially, in his version of working with you. The thing that makes him like really interesting is that he seems really emotionally articulate, and he kind of seems like he's opening up to you, etc., about Duke Stelmane at one period of the game. However, if you do, you know, pick certain dialogue options, you eventually realize that as intimately as he speaks about Duke Stelmane, she was actually under his manipulation and his mind control like the entire time. And there was no sense of actual intimacy or any type of relationship that they really had. It was all pure domination, I would say. So he doesn't see a way to connect with people outside of controlling them and manipulating them. So I would say he is very good at acting as if he understands emotion, but he's very bad at actually putting it into practice. I don't see him being able to have actual bonds, friendships, relationships with anybody, and it's more just about trying to understand them and get them in a way to feel connected to him and close to him, but he's very detached personally, like while he's doing it. So again, I'm gonna put him in work in progress. I feel like he's kind of an imposter where he acts as if he's very emotionally mature, but the way that he's actually detached doesn't speak very well to actual emotional maturity or understanding. Next, let's talk about Cazador. So Cazador is just purely like inherently evil. I mean, so are some of these other characters, but Cazador just like really, I don't know. But Cazador also, he has had a pretty traumatic past. If you go talk and speak to that skull of Velioth, which basically talks about Cazador's past, you can see that Velioth, which was basically Cazador's master, drilled a lot of really harsh lessons into him about not trusting anyone, putting him in his place, about how much power he has, etc., things like that. So Velioth has basically tortured Cazador throughout most of his life as well, but Cazador always has a very sadistic, very cruel mindset. He basically sees everybody as his pawns. He has no problem using them for his own benefit. I think he has zero empathy, zero compassion. It's all about power and control. He cares about people submitting to them, and that's basically all he cares about. He doesn't care about the means by which he achieves that. I do feel like as much as you don't have to necessarily be a morally good person, obviously, to have emotional maturity, there is some emotional maturity in having at least some type of empathy or ability to understand other people's thoughts and feelings, which I feel like Cazador doesn't have. He's not even like understanding people and trying to manipulate them. He is just straight up evil. Like, he doesn't care. In my opinion, he doesn't care what you're thinking. Like, he just cares about what's the easiest way to get you under his power and his control. And of course, you know, some of his experiences with his previous master probably contribute to him having that super sadistic mentality. But I don't know. I feel like he's extremely bad, and I would put him in emotional disaster because I don't see any maturity there whatsoever. Like, I don't see any way of him even using maturity or emotions to his benefit. Like, it's just pure evil. I don't know how to describe it because all these people are evil, but it's just, let me know what you guys think. Okay, last but not least, we have Viconia, which is a very interesting one. Because though Viconia is a character that I've personally only experienced in Baldur's Gate 3, I know she was there in previous Baldur's Gate games, and it seems like her morality has drastically changed in Baldur's Gate 3, and this is why people kind of have a problem sometimes with her as a character in BG3, because it seems to go against the character that she was in BG2. So before, in BG2, she was actively rebelling against Lolth. Like, at some point, Lolth had asked her to kill an infant, and she rebelled against that, and that caused a lot of religious drama, and she essentially ran away. But she was rebelling against these terrifying acts that this divine entity is asking her to commit, essentially. But then in Baldur's Gate 3, you see that she is basically blindly following Shar. Like, she's extremely loyal to Shar. She's abducting children, torturing people, killing people. So where is that disconnect? How before she was very rebellious and it made her sick to kind of do these evil things. And then later she's doing them, you know, without any second thought. So I feel like maybe over the years, like, her judgment kind of got warped, or she got tired of being on the run, and she basically throws herself and dedicates herself into serving Shar because it's like the only way that she finds a type of purpose. I don't know. I feel like she does understand emotion, at least it seems from her previous actions in Baldur's Gate 2. From what I've heard, but in Baldur's Gate 3, she is more into the blind devotion side of things rather than really emotionally considering the impacts of what she's doing to other people. So I feel like she's using her faith in Shar as an armor, and obedience to a cruel god is easier than, you know, staying on the run or confronting her own fears or morals. And that points to, you know, not being very emotionally mature. This one is so difficult because it seems like her character is so different. So I think based on just like the lore, I'm gonna put her in work in progress. But I would say that, you know, if she was purely only in Baldur's Gate 3, I'd probably put her even lower, like emotionally stunted perhaps, because I don't see very much consideration to her actions, I guess I would say. Anyways, so let me know what you guys think of these rankings. I don't really think anybody here belongs in deeply emotionally mature. At least personally, I don't know if this is actually true or not, like objectively, but I feel like in order to be deeply emotionally mature, like you can't really be so purely evil. Because I think a big part of emotional maturity is also empathy for other people and understanding the greater good. So I think that's kind of why in my previous tier list, I was ranking some of the more evil people lower and the nicer people up higher. But I don't know, maybe that's kind of a wrong assumption, but that's kind of just how I feel about it, I guess. But I definitely see some maturity in like a lot of these villains, some more than others. Anyways, I hope you guys liked this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy my content. I hope you guys are having a great week, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.